For nearly 2 weeks now, the country's pubs, bars and restaurants have closed their doors at 10 p.m, with crowds of thousands of people spilling out onto the streets and then onto the tubes. The country's leading restaurateurs and scientists are demanding a rethink of what they say is a misguided curfew. Our editorial column says while it was introduced for the right reasons, to help halt a second wave of coronavirus, a longer-term and better thought-out plan is needed to protect the economy and our health.
It's time for ministers who have never produced the scientific modelling to justify the early closure of the hospitality industry to think again and take account of the mounting evidence that their policy needs a nuanced approach. That would be good news for London's nighttime economy and comes at a time when the reality that coronavirus will be with us for many more months is becoming ever more apparent. It is vital that we plan sensibly for many months of disruption, not take a nonsensical blanket approach that does more harm than good, both in terms of health and the economy. Good government involves acknowledging mistakes.
Emma Lake is the deputy editor of the Caterer magazine and part of a coalition of restaurateurs, chefs, retailers and scientists demanding the government to introduce an alternative to the curfew. She joins me now. Emma, what's the key issue with the 10 p.m. closing time?
Our key issue with the 10 p.m. curfew is that it does appear to be a knee-jerk reaction from the government, and one that we've not yet heard any minister come out to spell the science behind simply. By kicking people out en masse at 10 p.m, what we're seeing is that they're gathering in streets and on public transport, and it's actually running counter to social distancing, as well as undermining the huge efforts and the investment the hospitality businesses have put in to keep their customers safe.
The time of 10 p.m. as well seems to cut right into the middle of dinner service.
For a lot of restaurants, it does mean that they can't have that second sitting, that they're further limited on covers which had already been hit through social distancing and things like that. We've gone out and spoken to the industry, and 65% of the operators who spoke to us said they don't see that their business can last more than 6 months with this in place. And indeed, UK Hospitality, the industry bodies, warned that up to 1 million jobs could be at risk.
Rishi Sunak has said that the alternative would have been to shut down the hospitality industry altogether. What do you make of those comments?
I think what we're asking the government to do is to work with the hospitality industry and to recognise that looking after guests is what these operators do best. It's what they're experts in. Looking at the problem that we seem to have at the minute with people leaving en masse, we would ask them to reconsider measures that would allow a staggered dispersal while also preserving this kind of fragile recovery that we're seeing in the industry.
What do you mean by a staggered dispersal?
Well, a staggered dispersal, it just allows for people not to say to their customers, you all must leave. Operators are putting a lot of measures to ensure people are arriving at venues in a staggered way so they can be directed to their seats with not too many pinch points and not too much crossover. And this just seems to kind of undermine that when they're then leaving the premises at the end of the evening.
So how do you see this could have been managed better from the start?
We saw earlier in the year that the government worked very closely with Oakman Inns when it was looking at the measures around the reopening of hospitality and how people would be managed and how flow of customers would be managed. And that was very successful. And we've seen from the Public Health England figures that kind of infection rates linked to hospitality remain incredibly low. And I think an approach like that, where you're talking to operators about what they can do, would reap rewards again now.
There's a campaign that's been launched. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, we've launched our Can the Curfew campaign. this week, which is calling on the government to reconsider and work with the industry. We've had the backing of many major figures from the industry, including Tom Kerridge, Robin Hudson, Jeremy King, Richard Corrigan, Asma Khan. And people can find out more about how they can get behind the campaign at thecaterer.com.